Good evening, everyone. My name is Madeleine Xiao, and I am the Piano Fellow this year for the Michael Hill International Violin Competition. I am extremely honored to be presenting tonight's Insider's Guide for the semi-final round. On stage with me here are some of my great friends who will join me in playing some of the excerpts you'll hear from the quintets tonight. So we have three violin fellows, Mana, Lorna, and Esther, who is actually on viola, and then our wonderful cellist, Howard. After a fantastic week in Queenstown where the 16 competitors played solo violin works and solo works with piano, we now shift into something completely different. Instead of standing alone, our semi-finalists are performing chamber music. It's no longer about how they play alone or with one more person. It's about how they play with four more. And somehow, all of this has to make sense. As musicians, we describe chamber music as a conversation, but it's a rather unusual conversation. Imagine 5 people speaking all at once. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they're interrupting or supporting someone else's idea. Sometimes they're leading or sometimes they're following. For me, that's what makes chamber music one of the most fascinating forms of chamber music, of music making, and in a competition setting, it's particularly revealing, because chamber music tests qualities that aren't always obvious in solo playing. Tonight, I'd like to give you a bit of an insider's guide into what we're listening and watching for in chamber music, before exploring the 3 wonderful piano quintets featured in this round by Schumann, Dvorak, and Shostakovich. One of the first things musicians talk about in chamber music is balance. A piano quintet consists of a piano and a string quartet. From an acoustical point of view, it's actually quite a strange combination. The piano is capable of making enormous amounts of sound. The strings, meanwhile, each contribute a single individual line, but altogether, the texture can get incredibly dense and almost overwhelming. The challenge is knowing exactly when to step forward and when to step back. A great chamber performance requires constant adjustment and awareness. Another great challenge in chamber music, and especially in a competition setting, is learning how to listen. One of the biggest differences between a good chamber musician and an exceptional one is whether they know only their own part or the whole score. The strongest chamber musicians aren't just playing notes. They're constantly reacting, listening, and making decisions in real time. And because rehearsal time is very limited, these skills become even more important. Now, before we move into playing some excerpts, I'll pass over to Lorna to give you some violin perspectives into techniques.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Lorna, and I'll just talk a little bit about string playing. So in a string quartet, we're looking a lot into blending our sound so that we sound like one harmonious texture rather than 4 individual string players. And to do that, we work on a lot of matching bow strokes, because the bow is where the sound is produced, and we usually rehearse a lot to try to follow each other's bows and listen to how the sound is produced to match the same tone color. And in a situation like today for the competition, each of the competitors actually only get 1 rehearsal with the whole group, so they have very little time to rehearse. And with that said, they have to be really flexible and adaptable to their colleagues, and to really be observant of what they're doing and try to match their bow strokes. But while doing that, they also want to be able to lead and gesture what they are thinking in their head in terms of what color they want and what atmosphere. So tonight you will maybe see a lot of them gesture and cue before they play, and that's them trying to express a particular expression or color and try to communicate to their colleagues before each note when they're playing. So it's a balance of being both adaptable to the situation, but also being confident and precise in terms of the leadership of demonstrating exactly what you want and to communicate that throughout the whole group today.
Thank you, Lorna. All of these ideas can be heard throughout tonight's 3 piano quintets. We'll begin with Robert Schumann's piano quintet in E-flat major. Today, it is one of the most beloved works in the chamber music repertoire, but when Schumann composed it in 1842, it was something quite new. Although earlier works existed for similar combinations of instruments, Schumann's piano quintet is often regarded as the first great masterpiece of the piano quintet genre and became a model for many composers who followed. One of the most fascinating aspects of Schumann's music is that he often imagined two contrasting sides of his own personality. These were Florestan and Eusebius. Florestan was passionate, energetic, and extroverted. Eusebius was more poetic, dreamy, and reflective. These two personalities appear throughout Schumann's music, often in close proximity. So the opening of the piano quintet throws us into Schumann's world immediately. Listen for the sense of energy and excitement, but also notice how musical ideas are constantly exchanged between the players. Even in this brief excerpt, we hear Schumann's remarkable ability to create momentum through collaboration. The music feels alive because every player is contributing to the conversation. In his second movement, it reveals a very different side of him. It begins with a funeral march, dark, measured, and solemn. The movement alternates then with a lyrical theme carried by the first violin and cello. Now let's hear a bit of both. If Schumann helped establish the piano quintet as a major musical genre, Dvorak expanded its possibilities in wonderful ways. The opening of the piano quintet number 2 begins in a remarkably intimate manner. Following a piano opening, a single melodic line in the cello emerges, creating a calm and almost reflective atmosphere. Gradually, other voices begin to join, and the conversation expands. What begins as something quite personal becomes something collective. Listen to how the melody moves between the instruments and how the texture grows organically from one into many. One of the great things about this passage is the way Dvorak allows every instrument to participate in the storytelling. The melody never belongs to one player for very long. Instead, responsibility is constantly shared. And that's one of the defining characters of great chamber music. Our final work comes from a very different musical world. Dmitri Shostakovich's Piano Quintet was composed in 1940 during a period of enormous political pressure in the Soviet Union. Like much of Shostakovich's music, it often feels as though multiple meanings exist simultaneously between the surface. The second movement is a fugue. For chamber musicians, a fugue represents one of the ultimate tests of ensemble playing. Every voice is independent, every voice matters, and every line must remain clear. Yet all of those independent lines must combine into a coherent whole. As you listen, notice how the theme enters one instrument at a time. In the third movement, Shostakovich's scherzo explodes with energy. Here, the relationship between the players changes completely. Instead of individual voices entering one by one, we hear the four string players acting as a unified force against the piano. The atmosphere is energetic and relentless. Something interesting about this quintet is, after all the intensity of the work, Shostakovich ultimately chooses not to end with a grand triumph. Instead, the quintet concludes quietly, softly, and in a major key. It's an ending that has fascinated listeners for decades. Is it peace, relief, optimism, or irony? Shostakovich leaves that question open for us to decide, and we will too, so you can hear it when the competitors play it. So as you listen tonight, I'd encourage you to watch how the players communicate and how they breathe together. Notice how melodies pass from one instrument to another. Notice how roles constantly change, and notice how each musician balances their own artistic personalities with the demands of the ensemble. Because ultimately, great chamber music isn't simply about playing together. It's about listening together and thinking together, creating the illusion that 5 individuals have become a single musical voice. And in a competition setting, that may be one of the most difficult and revealing challenges of all. This is chamber music, the art of conversation. Thank you very much, and enjoy tonight's performances. Just quickly give a massive round of applause for these wonderful players.